So you see why, to me, this project represents the best of what a university that is funded by the state should produce for the benefit of all of the people of the nation. In this regard, we are heavily dependent upon the media. And I want to take this opportunity to really welcome all of the members of the media who have come and who we can do all of this work, but we are really heavily dependent on you to take the news out, because as you popularize and you let the people know what we're doing, you create the groundwork for receptivity, so that when we go out there and we call for a public forum and we call, the fact that you have been so efficient in letting the nation know will help us to effectively complete this project. I now would like to introduce Ms. Renee Cozier, who is the graduate student and project research assistant. Renee is being stretched as gender and cultural scholars, sociologists, literary critics are all expecting her to come on board and to do very quickly what they have taken 2 and 3 decades to learn how to do. So we welcome Renee, who is doing extremely well at a steep learning curve.
Thank you, Dr. Morgan. Yes, so I am going to present data collected primary and secondary. Of course, I can't do all of this. So I'm just going to be looking at an overarching theme that we have care work. So that is how we're going to look at it. So first I'm going to look at secondary data. So the secondary data for this project is ongoing. And I'll just read out, I just got a few there in Theol. I suppose you can't read it all, but Miller, what we found is that Miller is saying that most times it's usually the workplace that dominates one's personal life, and in a negative way. Also, what we have coming out of it is the sexual division of labor, where women are expected to perform more tasks, and therefore there is that struggle to achieve work-life balance, and it's reflected in their lives and identities, and of course they have something they suffer called mother's guilt. I suppose some of you all know of that. Moving on. Right, so care work is really direct work that is directly, sorry, let me get my thoughts together for a minute. So care work it's different from other work because it's usually unpaid work, and it's usually like housework, like cleaning, taking care of children, taking care of the elderly, and it's usually done by women, of course. And this slide here speaks of the use of time studies in Europe. That says that if we had to count unpaid work, it is as high as 36.8% of the European Union GDP. Of course, we don't have these studies in the Caribbean, but this is what we are hoping to do with this project. Also, women are time poor because women, of course, work significantly more hours than men in both the market and household, if both market and housework work is taken into account. Next slide, please. Also, like Prof mentioned before, the growing and aging older population that we have in the Caribbean. So in 20 years, it's estimated that we will have an aging population moving from 1 million to 2 million. With this, of course, comes people suffering with diseases such as cancer, hypertension, Alzheimer's, and so on. Also, we are down to be one of the regions that is most prone to dementia. So of course we take that into consideration, and that's why we, when we looked at our primary data, we did an in-depth interview. Move on. Right. So primary data collected. So like I said before, we had our talking circle, and these are just some narratives coming out of the talking circles, and these narratives speak to the concern and fear that people face in the care economy. Of course, there is that. So if I can just read from here. So my mother, my 87-year-old mother, still supporting me. She helped me out with the children so I can work longer and be competitive. Of course, there's that role also when we look at the elderly. They play that role in helping balance work and life for the working population. But then there's also where the working population, they do the care work for the elderly. So for instance, that other narrative there, it says, the caregiver called me and she's not feeling well, on the verge of death. I call my brother, I call my cousin, I have to do all this from my mat house workplace to put something in place. And of course, this speaks to a theme that's coming out on the unreliability of caregivers. So it's crazy times when you have that. Also, you have someone said having to put her in a home cause family conflict. So we have that societal expectations of where care should be given. And there's this negative stereotype about institutionalized care that we have to also face in our society. You can move on to next. All right. So this is our next primary source. We did an in-depth interview, and I will just give you a little background. Janet Riley is a pseudonym given to our participant, and she is a single mother with a little boy. She is also a career-driven person, and her mother suffers from dementia. So this slide speaks also again about the unreliability of caregivers. So like you see here, she said he would go to a daycare, and I had about 2 other people who will help. Either my sister would help, or he would leave one daycare to another. So all these makeshift child arrangements she had to make, given because at that point her mother was, as she progressed in dementia, she was becoming very aggressive towards her son, her little grandson. Next slide. Then there's the psychological cost of care work. You will see here that Janet spoke about always living in constant fear that she might lose her mother, or her mother will walk out of the house. So she would speak of having to call home to make sure that her mother is there. But also later down you would see in this narrative, she said, you always, if you question yourself, if you're doing enough, you're guilty. And then when I put her in a home, I had to seek counseling. And this just speaks again to the negative stereotype that we have of institutionalized care in our society. Next slide, please. Health costs of care work. Of course, she said that she was in a total mess after caring for her mom at home for 6 years. And as she progressed in dementia, she eventually had to put her in a home. She said, by this time I had high blood pressure, I had high cholesterol, diabetes, migraines. I was a mess, a total mess. And she goes on to say that now she's in a good place because of what the steps she took to take her mother out and put her in a home. So this is actually coming out of our literature review. These are just some initiatives that I looked at, and this one was very interesting. It's the dementia villages, and they actually set up these dementia villages. This is in Holland, and it's self-contained. It's very expensive, but of course it looks at quality care for the elderly. And this is just ideas that we need to start thinking about also for our aging population. In this community, there's cinema, there's groceries, but of course, I think it cost them 20 million pounds or euros to set this up. And they're actually setting one up in Italy, and it's going to be open this year, and it will hold 100 residents. So these are just ideas of what other countries are doing to deal with care work and the elderly. And next slide, please. Considerations. So, of course, we're looking at work-life balance and the impact of the aging population. We need to, these are some of the initiatives coming out of it. We have flexi work time employment. These are all considerations that HR and companies should look at to ensure that they free up time for care work. Also cross-generational involvement. What we found is that a lot of young people tend to have a very negative stereotype towards the elderly. And then how do we get them involved in care work for the elderly? Also gender equity in care work. So have men also involved in child care arrangements and care work, taking care of the elderly. Also, the need to change strong cultural expectations that the family unit is the primary, if not exclusive, institution of care. So you can get quality care at institutions as well, but I think we need to ensure that policies and monitoring measures are put in place so that we change that stereotype about homes. Also, we have where it's just more than friends or just family, that we look at the community and how the community helps with care work as well. So there was this woman in our circles that shared that she had, in her street, everyone had a key to her house because her aunt had dementia. So then they would go and check on her when the caregiver wasn't there. So just all those dynamics that come into play because we don't really have things in place to treat with the aging population. And of course, the need for public awareness and about work-life balance challenges, as well as aging and illnesses associated with the process to effect change. Just in closing, I would like to say that with the aging population, you also have vulnerable groups in that group. So for instance, dementia patients, but also women HIV, women living with HIV. There's a student doing some work on that as well, and it's very interesting to hear their stories. So thank you for your time. That's it.